Welcome everybody to the Cycle25 virtual breakfast. We are super lucky today. We've got Ria Jairam from N2RJ from the ARRL. She is the director of the Hudson Division. She is a podcaster. She is a contester. She is an educator, and I could put a whole bunch of ERs on the end of this. But she's come to join us to talk about I gave her an intentionally vague topic so she could just riff on it. And it allows us to speak to many, many different things. So Ria, with that, I'm going to just turn it over to you and let you talk about anything you want. Hopefully something about the future of ham radio.
All right. Well, before I begin, how's my audio? Am I good, or is
it's a little choppy?
Because
but I think it's going
to be good in outdoor environments with this headset.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
Okay.
I think we're okay.
Well, I'm near. Okay. All right. Maybe or this is supposed to be good. Anyway, so I am Ria. My call sign is N2RJ. I am a director for ARRL in the Hudson Division. I've been in this role since 2019, taken the reins in 2018. And it's been quite a ride. I mean, I've learned a lot about the amateur radio community. Then I'm also involved in many aspects of amateur radio, both here and in my home country of Trinidad and Tobago, my former home country. So to begin with, let me tell you my story, and then I'll do a little bit of death by PowerPoint, and then I will I guess we could answer some questions. So I was first introduced to amateur radio in Trinidad and Tobago by a teacher by the name of Tony Limac, 9Y4 Alpha Lima, and he was a very interesting character. He taught me everything I know. He taught me a lot of things, not only about amateur radio, but some clandestine topics that I probably shouldn't talk about that until the statute of limitations expire, in terms of like interesting ways to use radios. I'll just put it that way. But anyway, he went silent key in 2014. And in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a pretty restrictive environment with amateur radio for kids. They don't allow anybody under 18 to get licensed anymore because they claim that it's a legal contract and they can't do that. So I'm actually trying to liaise with the authority. They have a new framework that they're going to be putting into place. And I'm actually getting my license reinstated as well. So so that is my story. My focus on amateur radio has always been technical, and but I've enjoyed a lot of social interaction in amateur radio as well. But a lot of it has been, I've made a lot of friends, and I've formed a lot of alliances with people, and a lot of that has had crossover with my technical knowledge. I've been an Elmer on the Flex radio community for a while, and I've helped a lot of people, in particular with networking, which leads me to talk about my professional career. Like many people in amateur radio, I work in technology, but I actually have my BSEE from NYU School of Engineering in Brooklyn, New York. And that, if that sounds familiar, that's where Ted Rappaport, N9NB, he's probably still faculty there, but he ran a wireless research institute at that university. So with that said, I work in software and systems engineering, but I work in the financial industry. I do some YouTube as outreach and education efforts, really to the community. It started during the lockdowns, so that people could still have technical knowledge available to them. I used to give a lot of in-person club presentations to clubs. I used to drive all over the place talking about SDRs and all sorts of stuff. But now, now I do a lot of it online. Hopefully with the restrictions ending, New Jersey ended its mask mandate probably on the 19th of May, I think it was. And with some of the counties approaching herd immunity in terms of like one county where I work actually is 70% vaccinated. So we're getting there. So hopefully. My former home country of Trinidad and Tobago, unfortunately, is not in nearly as good of a shape. They are really suffering. So, I'm glad that they get a little bit of assistance from the global community in terms of vaccination and healthcare aid. So without further ado, let me talk about some of the future directions I see. I see some familiar faces here. And at the end, I'll also talk about a special event that we're going to do. I see some familiar faces that some of this will probably be old hat to them, but I am going to share it anyway, and I hope that you learn something. All right. And let's see here now. So Apple, I use a Macintosh. Play slideshow in a window. Right. I'm also a huge fan of renewable energy and electric vehicles too. So just so you know. All right. And okay.
And you are live at a Hamfest today, aren't you?
Yeah. So So as a division director of ARRL, I attend all of these events, and it's really interesting because I attended mostly to outreach to people. It's important because I'll be quite honest with you. I don't want to be the director that just sits in the boardroom and makes decisions without getting member input, right? I like to hear the pulse of my constituents. Okay, it might be politics, but at the same time, I think it's good governance. It's good governance to listen to everybody and hear their concerns and address their concerns. I will never agree with everybody, but I will try to find consensus. So let me start this. Yeah, I'm live at a Hamfest. Hopefully my microphone is good.
Yeah, it's really improved.
The Hamfest yeah. Okay. Okay, so future directions for ham radio and beyond, because there is a lot of crossover into other things. So the first, we all know ham radio, and it's interesting. I just posted a YouTube short showing the old man's QSL cards that he sent out to people. So here you have the old man. Would you believe I got this picture from a pipe smoking website who heralded Hiram Percy Maxim as a famous pipe smoker? Ham radio has been constantly on the evolution, right? Both in terms of who is in ham radio and what we do in ham radio. We started with, of course, the spark gaps and CW, continuous wave, AM, single sideband, and somewhere along the line, FM, digital, high-speed data, space communications, and other sort of things. And we keep evolving. And we have to continue evolving, otherwise we're going to die. So change is hard. I'm sure you guys have seen this picture all over the internet, right? Help stamp out single sideband. If this was today, this would probably be on a big SUV and it'd be saying help stamp out FT8. A lot of people are resistant to change, and that's natural. That might not be a bad thing, but it might be where, sometimes we need to be a little flexible. People say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Not all change is good, though, and not all change is bad, actually. We want to preserve our legacy in terms of amateur radio has a lot of legacy, and a lot of amateur radio is preserving the history and the radio art. Okay. At the same time, we want to fulfill the other parts of basis and purpose, which is to progress to the future and enhance the radio art and make and keep pace with what's going on. This does not mean that we have to turn ham radio into the internet, right? It does mean that we have to embrace new technology where appropriate. It does mean that we have to continue to recognize the changing demographics of the world and help bring them to amateur radio. The reality is that let me see how best I could put this. In the United States Census paints a very clear picture of where our future demographics are headed. They say that over half of the people under 18 in the United States will be, a different demographic than what is currently the minority in the United States, if you get what I'm saying. at the same time, I think in a lot of amateur radio, I've received a lot of complaints that how, amateur radio is not diverse enough. Amateur radio does not represent the community. A lot of that is fair. But I don't think that things like enacting quotas and stuff like that are going to fix that. I do think that encouragement and nurturing of people of various backgrounds is how we're going to get there. And it's a big part of my outreach, naturally being a member of several diverse communities, right? But also, I try to encourage amateur radio to be for everyone. So that is one of the things that we need to work on. And you know what? There are people who say that, well, just don't focus on that kind of stuff. It's unavoidable, and it's even things like youth and such like that. When I was interviewing CEO candidate, one of the questions I asked him, I said, what are we going to do about our aging demographic? What are you going to do about the future of amateur radio? What are you going to do about bringing more people who look like me in amateur radio? That was my question, point blank. Only 2 of them gave a good answer. Okay, the rest of them gave really wishy-washy answers, and I won't say which 2, but I found that there was very little thought among many to do that. A lot of people play lip service to that. I try not to. I have no choice. So that is my little soapbox on that. The future. So not only do we have demographics of people, we have new ways that people interact. Okay, we have social media, where social media brings new interaction to people, where people are more interacting online rather than in the coffee shop or let's face it, the radio club. Although I do like to see people going to their radio clubs, and I'm hoping when all this pandemic stuff is over that we have in-person club meetings again, because I think those are valuable, but they must have a purpose. The YouTubers in New Elmer, I see a couple of them on there. I think they do great work with what they're doing, providing educational content that people can digest on their own time, in their own format. And also, quite frankly, YouTube gives them an incentive to do so, and it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing that we have people willing to step up to actually, go forward and present their technical knowledge in an easy to digest format. The controversy over digital modes. You would not believe how many times, I'm not whining, where people tell me that how I want to see FT8 banned from DXCC. And I tell them that's just never going to happen, unfortunately or fortunately. And I make no bones about it. Joe Taylor's a friend of mine. What Joe has done to help bring new blood into amateur radio and also help people get more enjoyment of amateur radio. My story that exemplifies this is my friend Eric N2RJ. Eric had an issue where excuse me, he was facing some problems where he had to move to an apartment, right? And he ran a coax cable out to his car, okay? And he ran a coax cable out to his apartment, that from his apartment to his car, and he ran FT8 on that. And that kept him on the air until he was able to move back into his home, and he was able to get on the air again. And I think that has a very good use case. Even looking on the other end of amateur radio, you'll find that a lot of seniors are moving now into restricted living. They're moving into homes and such like that. And you have technology to help them stay on the air. You have digital modes, you have remote operation, okay? And you have, quite frankly, DMR and other modes that they could, enjoy a little bit of the hobby they grew up with, or maybe they just discovered. Digital voice is, another thing. It's kind of like when we had the picture of help stamp out SSB. Some people say help stamp out DMR, help stamp out D-Star. Some people think that hotspots are not real amateur radio. I really disagree with that. I do think that they're an application of amateur radio. I don't want to see them in DXCC or any of the awards, but I do think that it's a valid thing that people can use to interact with each other. So, you know, I'm really happy that all of these new things are now available for people and that we can use them. There's been also a whole new collaboration with open source software. So you find that not only WSJT, but other software and hardware, to be quite honest, is actually being available now to you know, to make it so that people can interact in new ways. Okay, so you know, it's really a good thing that we're seeing new ways to do it, and I think that we can definitely strike a balance between preserving our legacy and embracing the new stuff. So let's talk about the YouTube. I did a cursory search on YouTube and some of the social media sites, and you know, it was kind of like where you look and you see some of these are clearly, you know, well, Ham Radio Crash Course I think is a pretty good resource, but you know, some of these are basically aimed at people who don't know anything about ham radio, and I think it's good. But I think a lot of YouTube content these days focuses on things like prepping and stuff like that. Not good, but I value the YouTube channels that focus on the technology, on telling people how to enjoy the hobby, how to enjoy service, how to help out their communities, you know, not just have personal preparation, but also for community service. Because remember, ham radio is not just a great hobby, it's also a valuable resource for in times of emergency, and it'll help out people as well. Now, in terms of our emergency role, I will say that we need to be cautious of where that is actually headed. A lot of agencies are investing a lot of money, time, and resources into improving their own resilience in communications. So therefore, our role in terms of getting, you know, like the typical Aries Races deployment, where we take a HT and go on the repeater and have emergency communications, is going to be old hat to them, right? They're going to have things like FirstNet. They're going to have, you know, even quite frankly, you had Hurricane Harvey where you had like Zello, where they were able to, you know, basically just use cell sites that remained up. You know, Harvey was largely a flood event. So what happened is that the cell sites had their backup power. The cell sites were on high ground, so people were still able to get in. Amateur radio will still have value, just not as frequently as it did in the past. Now, I'll tell you one exception to that rule. One exception to that rule is in the Caribbean, where I grew up, where we didn't have a lot of great communications infrastructure, and a lot of it due to cost and, you know, such like that, is still vulnerable. And quite frankly, there isn't as much skill as there needs to be there. So you know, I really value, like, you know, you have these little niches of YouTube content and such like that that shows people how to truly be in amateur radio, both for all its purposes, really. Reddit is a good you know, a good little niche as well too. You find, and what I like about Reddit is the Reddit crowd tends to trend younger, or at least young in heart. And you know, you have people like Sterling N0SSC. He's on there a lot. He actually brought me in there. Actually, he kind of dragged me in when somebody was talking about the ARRL, and I went in there to see what was going on. So people tend to think that I'm on defense of the ARRL. I'm not always in defense of the ARRL. I will admit when they're wrong. And but I do think that a lot of times, you know, that there are things that could be fixed. Like just today at these hamfests, why I go to these hamfests is that I see people that I would talk to and fix their issues. Like one guy, his license got spelled wrong in the in the FCC database, and he asked if the ARRL could fix it. So, you know, the section manager said that how he could go ahead and fix it with headquarters, and maybe the VEC could look into it. I am an admin moderator of a group called Ham Radio New to the Hobby. It's very heavily moderated. We don't tolerate any nonsense, as we say. but mainly that means that we don't allow people to go and troll and make an experience bad for newcomers. We want to make it where people will feel friendly and welcome, especially people like women or people like younger people who feel that that they're being beat up on. We want to make it a friendly and welcoming environment. So you'll find that a lot of things are actually, these are some of the things that you actually see in today's amateur radio. It has never been a better time to be a ham. You have cheap from going counterclockwise from the top right, you have a $35 computer that has about 100 times more power than the first lunar lander. Okay. You have on the left side, you have a cheap hotspot where you could talk worldwide. Although some of these are counterfeit, and I don't really endorse the counterfeit ones. I hope that people buy the genuine ones and support the developers. And on the right side, you have an SDR built from a kit. So, you have a lot of these innovations available to amateur radio today, and I think that that's just going to grow. The cool thing is that with the worldwide collaboration, you now have the ability to design something on your computer, send it, unfortunately or fortunately, overseas to a manufacturer to have printed circuit boards and complete kits built out, or even fully assembled units. And then, you sell it on one of the auction sites, or you put it on your own e-commerce site. You didn't have these things years ago. Years ago, you had to go and you had to drive places, and you had to go and get these things basically done in person.
Hey, Ria.
Next slide.
Let me just jump in here for a second.
Yes.
And the slides are fantastic, but I think Zoom is playing a game with us today where it blanks them on and off. You're not seeing that at that end, but at this end we are. It shows the slides sometimes, it doesn't show the slides another time. But we're getting some fantastic content out of you. I'll
PDF them and send them to you.
And your audio is pretty good. So what I'm going to ask is maybe we'll stop sharing the slides and just have a conversation. Let's have you use the slides as a guideline for what you want to talk about, but we'll preserve our bandwidth as best we can, if that's okay.
All right, that's fine. Yeah.
So if you stop sharing, then we'll be able to just see you and have a conversation.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll PDF the slides and send it to you if you want to incorporate.
Thank you so much.
Somehow, okay.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So in terms of in terms of ham radio these days, it's not all technical. In ARRL, of which I'm also involved in as a district chair for District 2, New York and New Jersey, a lot of women complain that QST is too technical of a magazine, and they don't like it because of that. They say they like CQ magazine because CQ magazine has more about operation. CQ magazine has things about where people enjoy ham radio socially, as a social event, right? A social activity. And that's a very valid point. So you'll find that with today's amateur radio, you have new ways to have social interaction. You have new friendships you find online, hybrid with ham radio. You have people with social media sites, YouTube channels, and not only YouTube, but Instagram too. I noticed there is one Instagrammer who goes on Instagram and makes contacts, and then she's live. That's YU3AWA, I believe. I think her name is, I hope she's from Serbia, I think, Maria or something like that. But she has a big following on Instagram, relatively speaking. You have Wael Raisa from Russia. She has a nice sizable, small, but for ham radio sizable following, where she goes and she activates parks. She doesn't do anything technical. She's not into the technical stuff. She's into the social aspects of amateur radio. And then you have people, who host little gatherings and learn things. Okay. So it's always new things to enjoy. What is the ARRL doing? So the ARRL has been expanding into video content. One of the things when I interviewed the CEOs I was in a room with several other directors interviewing the CEOs. One of the things that the current CEO pitched was that he's going to be doing new video content. He's going to expand the ARRL Learning Network. He's hired several YouTube talents to do video consulting for ARRL. And, we have, if you look in July QST, which you should be hitting your mailboxes soon, Dave Kassler is going to have a new column in QST because Joel Hallis is retiring. And, you're going to have more youth outreach, member engagement and initiatives. And then we have new publications and also some old publications. Now, myself and Scott Wright, K0MD, we have been pleading with the league for about 6 months to get an online version of QEX and NCJ available, right? So this idea started with myself and Scott Wright. And the last CEO kind of rejected it, and he was like, well, we'll see. And then, he talked to the publication department, we'll see. But, we persisted. And then eventually they caved in and did it. And it was a wonderful thing. Members had access to those two great publications, QEX and NCJ. And you know what? Sure, it's free included with the membership, but I think it'll encourage people to join, and it'll encourage people to share the knowledge. Knowledge is meant to be shared. And I think that the small price we pay in terms of losing print subscribers will be made up for in member engagement. We have this new publication called On the Air. And the thing is, Becky Schoenfeld has done a really wonderful job with it. This was actually the result of a member survey they had a few years back. And then we had a few of us actually went and kicked the idea to Howard Mickle and asked him, hey, what can you do for new amateurs? And then the publications department, I guess they went and went ahead with bringing On the Air to fruition. So On the Air has been fantastic. The first issue, I got many copies of the first issue. A lot of hams enjoyed it. A lot of old hams enjoyed it. A lot of new hams, of course, enjoyed it. And it solved the niche of where young ladies were telling us that how we are finally giving them a magazine they can understand. It's not a knock on ladies being not technical, because there are many. I have one good friend in ARRL who is a NASA research scientist. So we don't have lightweights, right? But there are a lot of people who just don't care the tech, and that's fine. This On the Air also has collegiate focus as well. And we've trying to actively reach out to colleges. We're actually also going to do some adjustment to the membership structure for youth membership, so that includes those who are in colleges as well, more inclusively. So a lot of good things happening on that front. Future trends, what are we doing? So, as I said, last year, the virus that shall not be named, because we don't want, to get flagged, has introduced a lot of interest in amateur radio. Great Britain has seen a sharp increase in licensing. The United States has seen a sharp increase in interest. We have not seen a sharp increase in licensing, only because our licensing was stuck in the past of having in-person exams, until thankfully some went and shook the trees loose. That would be Lucky 225, and yes, that's his real name, who is a friend of mine, and he's also a member of another community I'm in that deals with computer security and being curious about technology. So Lucky 225 shook the trees and got that done. ARRL, somehow New England Amateur Radio managed to convince them, and also Columbia University Amateur Radio Club, who has been asking me for a long time if they could do online testing. We went and we got it done. So the ARRL is doing remotely supervised exams, and that's good. The bottom line is we're going to have a lot of people in the service now. We need to greet them with a friendly attitude. We can't be telling them that how I've been licensed for 50 years. I've been licensed since they lifted the ban in World War II, and you need to bow to me. We need to tell them, okay, I've been licensed for so long, I'm willing to share my knowledge and experience with you, okay? And it's okay to make mistakes, but of course, we're here to learn from them. Be an Elmer, be a mentor, be a teacher, okay? Be a friend. Learning is going to be our future. Emergency communications is great. Emergency communications helps justify keeping our bans. Emergency communications helps the public, and it's a great way for people to visibly see what amateur radio does when you have those wildfire cameras showing that wildfires are about to start and the signals carried by amateur radio, so that one of these agencies can send a helicopter to throw some fire retardant and put out the fire. That's a good thing. At the same time, we need to be teaching people how to set up those things, how to program them, and how to develop new modes. We need to encourage partnerships with universities like what Ted Rappaport has been doing, like what Jim Breakall has been doing. All these are great things. So, we need to diversify our interests. We definitely need to keep on advancing the radio art in both technical and operational aspects. Spectrum is going to be a future issue, and it's a current issue. Big wireless is chomping at the bit for our microwave spectrum. Who knows who else is chomping for our other spectrum? I heard the latest is that high frequency traders are trying hard to set up shortwave stations to do low latency stock trades. And yes, I do know a lot about that because I work in that industry. And I kind of have my own opinions, but I will not say anything due to the fact that that FINRA might get ticked off at me. We always have to be wary that we need to use it and lose it. Okay. So we need to use it before we lose it, and we have to always find innovative ways to use it. We can't just say it how well amateur bands will be here tomorrow. We have to do like what happened in Europe. Okay, like in Europe where their 2 meters was threatened, the IARU got up and they didn't say please have mercy on us. They said, well, this band is used so heavily by amateurs worldwide that if you put something commercial there, there is a very high chance you're going to be interfered with, and there's nothing you can do about it. So we need to have the attitude that we are there, we're present, we're using our frequencies, and we're using more of our frequencies, and we're not leaving them sitting idle to waste and be taken away from us, because they will be taken away from us. Yes, we are going to lose spectrum. That is a hard fact, but we can lose less of it if we make use of it. And all of these things I'm talking about, things like the open source software and hardware, bringing new blood into amateur radio, younger people, different demographics, women, scientific minded people, schools, colleges, and universities will help us to use that spectrum. Okay, things like balloon launches and stuff like that will help us use that spectrum. I talk a little bit about ARRL. ARRL has been a great thing to happen in amateur radio. ARRL has been, I know Randy, WU2S, this campus I'm at, actually Randy's a club member here. And Randy has been doing great with ARRL. We need more ARRLs. We need more ARRLs because this is a visible, tangible benefit to society that also advances the technical and operational phases of the art. Finally, I'm going to talk about the Hudson River Radio Relay, which is a new event. So it's going to be, I'll link the website. We're going to activate Bannerman Castle in the middle of the Hudson River. It's never been had amateur radio activations on it. And it's going to be a new US island. So it's be fresh meat next Saturday. I think the times are on the website from So the person who organized this put it in Eastern time. So it's 1700 to 2100 UTC, and I'll send the link. Their goal is a modest 2,000 contacts, so please help them make the 2,000 contacts. I'm going to try to visit some of the stations and also go on the island, and we're going to help. They're going to also help to raise funds by, they have a number of different things. They have a raffle for a Zygo G90 radio that they're going to be having there as well. And that is my little spiel. And I thank you very much. Like I said, I'll PDF these slides. I'm so sorry for the bandwidth. I thought it would have been better, but I'm here.
That's okay.
Questions in the chat if you want to.
We'll get that out. And I thought we'd have a little bit of a chance to chat. I've got as you see, if you look around the call, there's a pretty interesting crowd here. Some names, like I said, you will know from the community. We are all the way from Canada through California, even over to the UK. So I'm very proud of this group. It's a very thoughtful group, and I'm going to set you guys up with that comment in case you want to put some interesting, thoughtful questions out there. Anyone?
So I see some in the chat. Do you want me to address some in the chat? Or?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the first one I said QS Smitty Halibut. Yeah, I know him from Twitter too. QSC is too technical. Don't subscribe to QEX. You know what? That's true. But you know what? Everybody has their own comfort level. And I think having a basic magazine was a great thing. There is one I wanted to address from Wayne KH6WZ. So Wayne, you're probably psychic or you hacked my email. There was a QST column called Wild News and Views. It was removed in the 60s. Time to bring it back? Absolutely. And I've asked the CEO if he could bring it back. Even if it's on the air or an online supplement, I want to see it brought back. I've had interest from ARRL in bringing it back, and we can have a rotation of writers. I can't do everything for the ARRL, so I'm going to depend on having a rotation of writers, but I don't mind prodding them along to write good content. But I think that that's definitely something we can have.
So a question here from George. George, do you want to do that live or should I read it out? He's muted at the moment. He says, would the league be interested in promoting audio podcasts the same way they do YouTube?
So, audio podcasts are an interesting thing. Audio podcasts are great. I think that the league is definitely interested in promoting them. Their focus right now is building out their video infrastructure, but I'm pretty sure they would be interested in more podcasts. They actually do quite a few podcasts already. They do like the On the Air podcast, the Eclectic Tech. The last one, the Doctors In podcast, had to end, unfortunately, because Joel Hallis was retiring for personal health reasons and such. So, he's completely out of it. So it's kind of
I think George's comment was more towards the independent podcasts that are out there, because right now we don't see a lot of folks independently, or sorry, the ARRL isn't really set up to do YouTube as much as the community is. And I think that may be also a little bit true about the audio. George, would you like to say something?
Yeah. Hi, Ria. Thanks a lot for being here. Your presentation is really quite spot on. So thank you for taking the time. So myself and a few of the other folks here produce a couple different audio podcasts on amateur radio, and they're fairly in-depth. And so I've seen a lot of outreach from the league to the YouTube community, which I think is wonderful. So I was really very happy to see that. It just seems like an obvious move, but it's good to see. But for those of us who are doing, in our case, technical podcast content creation, is that something that the league would be interested in collaborating with us on?
So, that's interesting. The initial comment from David when he, when he was in the interview room was that Publications are nice, but he wants to move us more into a video mindset. Audio podcasts would definitely be interesting. I think there's renewed interest in audio podcasts. I'm certainly going to bring it up to him and ask him what his whole deal is with them. So we're definitely going to be looking at that, but I will definitely bring it up.
Great,
Independent
thank you.
podcast being promoting of independent content. I think the goal right now though is to have ARRL as promoting other people's content, but also building up our capability to originate our own content.
Very good.
Question. Rod, I have a question real quick.
Please go ahead.
Hey, Ria. So I've noticed the ARRL has been doing a lot more video series on their YouTube channel, which is great. One of the problems that I've been talking to other YouTubers about that have been interactive or in the know on producing some of those videos is it's just talking heads. So it's PowerPoint presentation and talking head presentations. Is there any talk about doing other stuff other than PowerPoint and talking head presentations about, antenna building and, things that we can basically do a show and tell to get more people involved versus, death by PowerPoint?
Yeah, and I've talked with David off and on about that. I think right now what you're seeing is where they're starting out, and I don't think this will be the final product that's going to be, there, so to speak, permanently. I think it's going to be where we're going to have a lot more practical videos. Right now, I'll tell you, they're rebuilding, especially the ARRL lab. So the lab is getting a refresh or a retrofit to do content and to do more in-depth product reviews and not just PowerPoints. I think right now they're just doing PowerPoints because they want to get content out there and get comfortable with the thing. Yeah, talking head videos are, I do talking head videos sometimes, but I always break them up with practical examples and B-roll and all that kind of stuff, because it's people don't want to just see you sit there and talk,
Right. YouTube is a great format of, 15 minutes or less where, you can keep the attention span of someone. And sometimes it's a little intimidating whenever you scroll through YouTube and you see a PowerPoint presentation that's, an hour and a half long. You're like, man, do I really want to sit here and watch that? So, yeah, I'm glad that they're thinking outside the box.
So I brought up the example of the RF safety video to David as an example of, compare and contrast. My RF safety video got 15,000 views and counting. And the ARRL's RF safety PowerPoint got maybe 1/10 or 1/4 of that. And, that shouldn't be, they should be really leading this. But the thing is, I included practical examples. I included, illustrations and such like that. And you have to keep moving. So I do have a professional background in video, by the way, in terms of I do this professionally for a number of places. I worked in cable television for 10 years. And, you have to keep things moving. If you just have one talking head on a screen, it's not going to keep people going to click. People have the ability to click. It's not like when I was a kid where you had to get up and change channel. Right. So, yeah, so absolutely spot on. I'm going to keep bringing this up to him in the executive committee meetings, which I'm in all the time, even though I'm not on the executive committee. The topic of video comes up, and a lot of it focuses around the formats and such. And I'm like, you know what? People don't care if your videos are 1080p or 4K or 812K, etc. People care that you keep their interests. And Kyle, I think you're spot on with that.
Yeah, very good. Hey, I've got a question from EY here. John, a rhetorical question, or do you want to ask this yourself? You can unmute if you want.
No, you can go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, John. You're there.
Okay, so here's my rhetorical question. Are local ham radio clubs a benefit or a hindrance to the future of ham radio? And the real question, I guess, is what should replace or enhance them?
Okay. That's a touchy subject. I'm never going to make anybody happy with an answer to that. I think having been to many a radio club, and now I visit a lot of radio clubs virtually, but I used to drive around to a lot of them. I used to attend meetings and such like that, even as an observer. The local clubs, that is, like if they have a meeting after work, I'll drop in. I think some clubs do it well, right? And some clubs don't do it well. I think that some clubs really need to figure out what holds member interest. I do think that local clubs will be here to stay, if not for the reason that, you need to get people back together, and you also need to liaise with some of the local resources who have a mutual benefit. Things like local governments, because you remember you're helping them out with emergency communications, right? I definitely think local clubs have a role in that. A supplement to local clubs will definitely be online communities, one, and two, on-the-air communities. I don't think that they're going to substitute for it. People might say, well, the whole world is virtual now. I think that's a step back. I think that people still need to get together. Even in my other role, I do video and technical stuff for worship, right? And we've had a thing where people have been at home and watching the services on their computers. It's not the same. That's a different level of things, but it's not the same. You need to bring people together. You need to have things like kit nights. Yeah, you can have those virtual, but then you know what a pain in the neck it is to set up a camera, to do a kit build, live on a screen. I give my kids have a virtual piano teacher. I have to set up 2 cameras with her, one to show the keys and one to show the face. It's a pain in the neck, and I have to break that down because they take my good cameras sometimes.
So Ria,
uh-huh.
Ria, my suggestion would be that since you're a troublemaker, you might suggest to the ARRL that they look at their infrastructure. For example, we have this national traffic system, and we have all these positions people set up for doing stuff. And I go on 40 meters in the evening, and I hear 100 people check in, and they all say QRU. So maybe it's time for the ARRL to invest in some staff to actually help local clubs move into the 21st century. That's my suggestion, because that might make a lot more of it. I agree, we need local clubs, but we need good local clubs. And no one's helping them, right? So that's my 2 cents.
And that's a comment. Let me build on that, because I think, one of the comments I hear is the ARRL here in Canada, RAC, the RSGB. What are you going to be? What's it about? Is it going to be more about content, or is it going to be about promotion or enablement? And I think what a lot of the clubs are needing is some templates to get them there. The reason this call exists is because of that. It started out as a club extension, and it very quickly spread across North America because of this hunger for content over structure. So I'll let you comment on that, and then I want to ask Frank for a question.
Ria, thank you for being here today. I know you're juggling many balls, and I just appreciate it. I think the previous question that John asked, I would label you as the John Lewis good troublemaker. That is, the trouble you might make is good trouble that any diverse organization really has to have, unless it becomes fossilized. Let me make 2 points. One, shameless promotion, but on John's question of clubs and new technology, I had the pleasure of having our host, Rod Hardman, and Nick Bradley, chair of the Denby Dale Club in England, to be my guest in a feature interview that will drop tomorrow on the ICQ podcast. It runs about an hour long, so if you're mowing your grass, plan accordingly if you're listening. But I was exceptionally pleased with the range and content of my guest comments about this very issue, John. And so I hope that you will avail yourself. The question I would have for Ria, you mentioned the census data and the demographic storm that the country and many countries, developed countries, are facing. And certainly the ARRL has. And I'm a demographer. I mean, that's been my background for 45 years. And I just wonder if ARRL writ large, obviously you take it seriously because of your comments, but do the other board members take that seriously and realize the consequences for the ARRL?
So, in terms of, I'm pretty sure all of them take it seriously. As far as being vocal about it, I've seen some of them being vocal about it, but I definitely think there needs to be some improvement, and I've been shouting this from the rooftops. And quite frankly, I mean, I really think we need to improve. It's not like we have this done well at all. I don't think it's done well at all. I don't think that we're actually supporting our future demographic, to be quite honest. I think that a lot of people figure, well, this will solve itself. And some people think that, well, maybe we need to do it later. But at the same time, I think that there are a few of us that care enough that hopefully bring pressure from the community, because that's really my strategy. My strategy is really the community needs to drive this, and people need to listen, to the voices from the community. If they're not hearing it from the community, they're going to figure that things are okay.
Well, Ria, let me just add this comment and say bravo to your comments there. I couldn't appreciate them more. And I will just be candid. What concerns me, and if you take me as a person out of it, I've published 50 papers in scientific journal. I mean, I've been there, edited. This isn't that big a deal as far as my ego is concerned. But on the point, Scott Wright, whom you mentioned, and I just had a paper rejected at QST on generational changes in the ARRL sweepstakes over 20 years, in which we got matched age data from membership. And there is a really clear indication that CW contesting, as far as the sweepstakes are concerned, will peter out in 15 years. And yet, why was it rejected? Not on technical grounds, because the message was too negative and it wouldn't be prudent to publish that in QST. Look, that's Becky's job. I've been on her side of the desk. I understand it, no question. We'll shop the manuscript elsewhere. But the rationale for that flies in the face of your comments about we need to look at the demographics, because if the leading journal won't publish a professionally done analysis of their data that they supplied, then somebody's putting their head in the sand. And I'm not picking on Becky. I think she does a great job. I've been a fan of her for years. So I'll just point that out to you. That's an issue.
No, I agree with you. And to be honest, this is the first time hearing of that. And so I don't micromanage the league. I provide governance and guidance, but this is very bothersome. This is not something I want to hear, and I'm going to be taking this up with David, possibly either personally or at the next EC meeting, or the next board meeting, to be honest. But I think it needs to be addressed sooner than that. I'm also going to call Scott and talk to him, because I value his input as kind of like a senior member of the community. So I'm definitely going to follow up on this. I'm not pleased to hear something like that at all.
Very good. Okay, John, NBC, you've got a comment.
I do. Good stuff. Enjoying what you're doing. Great talk this morning. I want to make a kind of a generic comment, if I may. As you know, I'm technically minded, but as many hams are, of course, but many hams aren't. And I often hear the comment, QST is too technical. We got to make it more human. Well, now let's ask a question. What kind of a hobby is ham radio? Is it a technical hobby? Oh, yes. Is it a Is it a radio operations hobby? Oh, yes. Is it a human hobby or a face-to-face human exchange hobby? Of course it is. People talking to people. I don't think the problem with QST or the league is that it's too technical. I think that should not be the dominance one way or another. It's what the National Journal for ham radio should not be all human, all operational, all technical. It needs to be all three of them. Why do we go to radio clubs? We go for radio clubs for the same reason. We want to meet people. We want to learn technical. We want to learn about operations. Don't focus it in one direction. That's my soapbox for today.
No, and first of all, I'd like to thank you for all your contributions over the years. I read your articles. I really, I enjoy them. And no, I think you're right about that. I don't like this notion that we're going to be a non-technical hobby. At the same time, I think there are different levels of technical interest in amateur radio, and I think we need to definitely bring these people. They have licenses. They're radio amateurs. Great. Let's see how we could accommodate them. I think that on the air, being lighter on technical content, lighter on advanced technical content. I mean, those of us, I've been licensed almost 25 years now. And, for me, a lot of things are old hat. I have an engineering degree. I work in, highly technical fields. So it's all, old hat for me. I kind of get where these people are saying, they're new, they're not so new, they're getting into it and they see stuff that's over their head. I think that on the air and similar efforts to that, they don't gut QST, they don't gut the technical content out of QST, but they put something separate for newcomers to digest. I think that was
I highly agree.
I want to see the technical content improve. Back in like 2002, I complained to, it was either Jim Haney or Joel Harrison at the time. I said, why are you taking the tech articles out of QST? So I definitely think there needs to be different strokes for different folks. At the same time, you can't please everybody, right? But I definitely think that we need to have something for people to get onboarded, so to speak.
Absolutely. Great kudos to Becky Schoenberg for what she's been doing with online and her new role with QST. But and we certainly need stuff for newbies, but we also still need stuff for the technical type, because it is a technical hobby, it's a social hobby, and it's an operational hobby, and we should never move it so that it's only one of those.
I have this argument with people who tell me ham radio is all about MCOM, and I was told this in the ARRL boardroom, and I told that person, you have not read the entire content of Basis and Purpose. You just read the second half of the first sentence. Please read the whole thing. So absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, as we've gone through the last almost 2 years now, and brought, by the way, a couple of our Padawans, as we affectionately call them, on this call, who I'm going to ask to unmake Mike here for a second. But they have really struggled with this because one of their sources is us. This is one of their big calls. But getting to the right questions and the right answers from mentors, I think, has been a huge struggle for people entering the hobby. So Ilya and Dante, do you have anything to add to that or any specific questions? Because this is your chance to influence, my friends. Mic's off.
Honestly, I don't know what to say. I think everything was already covered. So I was thinking hard about the question I might have, but I don't really have one.
Very gracious.
Let me
Thank
ask you.
Go ahead.
Let me ask, how do you pronounce your name, your first name?
It's Yulia. It's like a Ukrainian version of Julia.
Oh, Julia. Okay. Yulia. Okay, good. I don't like to get it wrong. Good. Okay. So look, Yulia, if you do figure out any questions, that you want to ask, you feel free to reach out to me at, my email is good on QRZ, N2RJ at awrl.org. You can reach out to me and I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay. Any
All
other
right.
questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was just saying that how I'm going to pack up in a few minutes. So, if you have any questions.
Very good. I'm actually going to wind up the recording of the call. Thank you, folks that have joined us from YouTube, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks with our next recording.